Beloved child, what if the person you trust the most, the one who looks into your eyes and says everything is honest, is silently carrying a chapter they've never dared to show you? And what if that hidden chapter isn't about betrayal today, but about a past they fear could change how you see them forever? The idea that someone close to you may be hiding something about their past immediately triggers tension, because trust feels fragile when secrecy enters the picture, and your mind starts replaying small details, the hesitation in their tone, the times they changed the subject, the moments they seemed distant for no clear reason, and suddenly those tiny fragments begin connecting into a story your imagination builds rapidly. And the more you think about it, the heavier it feels, because intimacy is not just about physical closeness, it is about emotional transparency, and when you sense there is a locked door in someone's history, your instinct is to either force it open or quietly fear what's behind it. But here is the deeper truth most people miss: everyone carries a past, and not every secret is a threat. Sometimes it is simply unresolved shame, fear of judgment, or a painful memory they are not ready to relive. And when suspicion grows without communication, imagination becomes more dangerous than reality, because imagination fills gaps with worst-case scenarios, and that is where relationships begin cracking, not because of confirmed betrayal, but because of silent assumptions. And if someone close to you is hiding something about their past, the real question is not, what did they do, but, why are they afraid to tell me? Because fear of disclosure usually reveals more about emotional safety than about the past itself, and when you approach this situation with confrontation fueled by anger, you create defensiveness, but when you approach it with calm curiosity, you create space for truth, and truth rarely surfaces under pressure, it surfaces under trust. And maybe the darkness you fear is not darkness at all, but simply a chapter written before you entered their life, a chapter they regret, learned from, or emotionally detached from long ago. And if you truly value the connection, the power lies not in dramatic accusations but in grounded conversation, because relationships survive not by having perfect pasts but by building honest presence. And the intensity of this realization forces you to confront your own insecurities too. Are you afraid of losing them, or afraid of feeling compared to who they once were? Are you threatened by what you don't know, or by what it might make you feel about yourself? And this internal reflection is uncomfortable but necessary, because sometimes the dark secret narrative is more about your fear than their history, and if there is indeed something significant being hidden, the healthiest path forward is not panic, not suspicion spirals, but clarity through dialogue, boundaries through respect, and decisions based on truth instead of imagination, because at the end of the day, a past cannot compete with a present built on transparency, but secrecy combined with silence can quietly erode even the strongest bond, and the real power in this situation belongs to the one who chooses emotional maturity over emotional reaction. Sometimes the truth does not arrive as a confession, it arrives as a pattern, subtle, repeated, easy to dismiss at first, but impossible to ignore once your awareness sharpens, and when you begin suspecting that someone close to you may be hiding something about their past, it is rarely because of one dramatic moment. It is because of small inconsistencies that slowly collect in your memory. The way they abruptly change topics when certain subjects surface, the slight tension in their body language when history is mentioned, the overly controlled answers that sound rehearsed instead of natural, and these signs do not automatically mean deception, but they do signal discomfort. And discomfort always has a source, and the mistake most people make at this stage is jumping straight from observation to accusation, because once accusation enters, defensiveness follows, and defensiveness blocks clarity. And what you truly need right now is clarity, not drama, and as you replay the moments that triggered your suspicion, ask yourself whether you are seeing actual avoidance or projecting insecurity, because there is a difference between someone protecting a painful memory and someone actively hiding harmful behavior, and that difference matters deeply, and intuition is powerful, but it must be filtered through emotional balance, because if you are already feeling insecure, your mind will interpret neutral behaviors as threatening, but if you are calm and observant, you will notice whether the secrecy is rooted in fear, shame, or manipulation, and fear-based secrecy often shows up as vulnerability struggling to surface, while manipulation-based secrecy shows up as contradiction and inconsistency. And understanding that distinction gives you power, because power here is not about exposing them, it is about deciding how you will respond. And your response determines whether the relationship strengthens or fractures, and instead of interrogating, consider opening a space for homes. Not by demanding details, but by expressing how you feel when transparency seems blocked, because when someone feels emotionally safe, they are far more likely to reveal what they once buried, and if they continue avoiding clarity even after you create safety, that tells you something important too, because unwillingness to build trust is more concerning than a complicated past itself. And as you navigate this situation, remember that every person has chapters they are proud of and chapters they struggle to revisit, and the real test of closeness is not whether the past was perfect, but whether the present can handle truth without collapse, and sometimes the signs you notice are not warnings of betrayal but invitations to deeper communication. And sometimes they are reminders that trust requires courage from both sides, and the strength you show now, whether through patience or through firm boundaries, will shape what happens next far more than silent suspicion ever could. There comes a moment when silence becomes heavier than the truth itself, when the tension of not knowing starts creating more distance than the secret ever could, and that is the night you decide to speak, not with anger, not with accusation, but with steady courage, because you understand now that how you ask determines what you receive, and as you sit across from them, your heartbeat feels louder than usual, not because you want to fight, but because you know this conversation could either deepen the bond or expose cracks that were already forming, and instead of saying, "What are you hiding?" you choose something stronger, something grounded, something that opens space rather than closes it. You say, "I feel like there's something from your past that's hard for you to talk about, and I don't want to judge you." Everything slows down, because calm questions disarm defensiveness. And if there truly is a hidden chapter, especially one tied to intimacy or personal history, the reaction you see next tells you more than the details ever could, because guilt reacts differently than shame, manipulation reacts differently than vulnerability, and when someone feels attacked, they protect themselves, but when someone feels safe, they often reveal the weight they've been carrying, and maybe their eyes soften, maybe their voice trembles slightly, maybe they admit that they were afraid you would see them differently, afraid you would compare, afraid you would leave, and suddenly the dark secret feels less like a threat and more like a wound they never fully healed, and you realize something powerful. Secrecy grows in the absence of safety, not always in the presence of betrayal, and as the truth begins unfolding, piece by piece, you listen not to react but to understand. Because understanding gives you control over your response, and this is where your maturity is tested, because hearing about someone's past can trigger insecurity, ego, jealousy, or fear, and those emotions are human, but they do not have to control your decision, and the real question becomes simple yet heavy: does their past conflict with your values today? Or does it simply challenge your comfort? Because there is a difference, and if what they reveal is rooted in growth, learning, regret, and closure, then the past becomes context, not competition. But if what they reveal exposes ongoing dishonesty or patterns that threaten your trust, then clarity gives you power to decide your boundaries. And that is the strength of confrontation done right. It replaces imagination with information, fear with facts, suspicion with understanding. And whether the outcome strengthens the relationship or forces you to reconsider it, you walk away from that conversation lighter, because uncertainty no longer controls you, and when uncertainty disappears, you regain emotional balance, and emotional balance is power, and in that power you realize something profound. The truth rarely destroys strong connections, silence does. After the truth is spoken, after the tension-filled silence fades, after every hidden fragment of the past is finally laid on the table, you sit with a feeling that is strangely calm yet deeply heavy, because knowing changes everything, and now the question is no longer, are they hiding something, but, can I live with what I know? And this is where emotional maturity separates reaction from wisdom, because hearing about someone's past, especially something intimate or complicated, can trigger ego, comparison, insecurity, even quiet resentment, and those emotions are natural, but they are not instructions, they are signals, and you must interpret them carefully, because there is a difference between a past that shaped someone into who they are today and a past that still controls them, and as you reflect on what was revealed, you analyze not the details but the patterns. Do they take responsibility or do they justify? Do they show growth or do they show repetition? Do they express regret or do they minimize impact? And these subtle indicators tell you whether you are dealing with someone evolving or someone hiding behind half-truths, and the decision you face is not about punishing them for what existed before you, it is about protecting your peace moving forward, because peace requires trust, and trust requires consistency, and if their honesty tonight feels genuine, If their vulnerability feels real, if their willingness to answer without defensiveness feels sincere, then staying becomes a conscious choice rather than blind hope. But if their words feel controlled, incomplete, strategically revealed instead of openly shared, then walking away becomes strength rather than loss. And this is the moment where you must check your own heart honestly. Are you staying because you believe in the present version of them, or because you fear starting over? Are you walking away because your values are firm, or because your ego feels bruised? And clarity demands brutal honesty with yourself, because relationships built on unresolved doubt slowly erode from the inside. And you deserve emotional stability, not constant questioning. And as you sit with your decision, you realize something powerful. Their past does not define your future unless you allow it to, and the control lies entirely in your boundaries, because boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. And choosing to stay with conditions of transparency is strength, just as choosing to leave when your standards are compromised is strength. And no matter what you decide, you leave this chapter transformed. Because you confronted fear instead of feeding it, you chose communication instead of imagination, you chose clarity instead of silent suspicion. And that alone proves growth. And as you step forward from this point, whether together or alone, you carry something solid within you, the understanding that truth may shake you temporarily, but it frees you permanently, and freedom, even when painful, is always more powerful than illusion. When everything settles, when the confrontation is over, when the truth has been heard and the decision has been made, whether you chose to stay or to walk away, a deeper realization slowly rises within you, and it hits differently, because you begin to understand that this entire situation was never only about someone else's hidden past, it was about your emotional strength, your boundaries, your insecurities, your standards, and the way you respond when trust feels uncertain. And that realization is powerful, because secrets test more than relationships, they test identity. And throughout this journey you were forced to confront uncomfortable parts of yourself, jealousy you didn't know was that strong, fear of comparison you never admitted, anxiety about not being enough, the silent need for reassurance. And facing those emotions without running from them is growth. Because many people react outwardly to avoid looking inward, but you chose to pause, communicate, evaluate, and reflect, and that alone shifts you to a different level of emotional awareness. And whether the relationship survived or ended, you now carry clarity about what you can tolerate and what you cannot, what makes you feel secure and what destabilizes you, what aligns with your values and what challenges them. And this clarity becomes protection for your future, because awareness prevents repetition. And one of the deepest lessons here is that a person's past is not automatically a threat, but silence combined with fear creates instability, and you learned how much emotional safety matters to you, how important transparency is, how essential mutual vulnerability feels, and you also learned that imagination is powerful but dangerous when unchecked, because suspicion without communication can damage something that truth might have healed, and at the same time, blind trust without discernment can ignore red flags that need attention. and now you understand balance, the balance between intuition and evidence, between patience and boundaries, between love and self-respect, and that balance is maturity, and maturity transforms pain into perspective, and perspective into power. And as you move forward from this chapter, you do so differently, you know. Longer ignore subtle discomfort, you no longer allow fear to dictate silent resentment, you no longer avoid difficult conversations to keep temporary peace, because you've realized that real peace is built on honesty, not avoidance. And perhaps the most profound shift of all is this: you now trust yourself more, because you faced uncertainty without collapsing, you handled tension without exploding, you made a decision without losing yourself, and self-trust is stronger than relationship. Security, because even if people change, self-trust keeps you stable. And that stability becomes your new foundation, and from this foundation, future relationships will feel clearer, stronger, and more aligned, because you are no longer operating from insecurity but from awareness, and awareness attracts healthier dynamics, and in the end, what felt like a dark secret became a mirror. And that mirror showed you exactly who you are when tested, and who you are when tested is far more important than what anyone else hides. After everything has been revealed, after the tension has settled and the emotions have stopped shouting inside your mind, you arrive at the most important moment of all. The moment where no one else is responsible anymore, where no secret controls you, where no past event holds authority over your present, because now it is only about the decision you make, and this decision is not about punishment, not about ego, not about proving who was right or wrong, it is about alignment, about asking yourself whether what you feel now is peace or constant doubt, whether your heart feels safe or permanently alert, whether staying would be an act of strength or an act of fear of being alone, and these questions are uncomfortable because they require brutal honesty with yourself, but this is where real growth separates from emotional reaction. Because sometimes forgiveness is powerful and rebuilding is possible, but only when transparency replaces secrecy completely, and sometimes walking away is not weakness but self-respect, especially if trust has been fractured beyond repair, and the truth is, there is no universal right answer here. Only the answer that allows you to sleep peacefully at night without replaying scenarios in your head, without questioning your worth, without feeling like you are competing with someone who exists only in history. And what makes this moment transformative is that whatever you choose, you must choose it consciously, not impulsively, not emotionally overwhelmed, not pressured by fear of judgment from others, but calmly, firmly, intentionally, because when a choice is made from clarity, regret does not follow, and you begin to realize something deeper. This entire experience was preparing you to upgrade your standards, to refine what loyalty means to you, to strengthen your communication boundaries, to become someone who does not tolerate confusion disguised as love, and whether this relationship continues or ends, your next chapter will look different because you are different now. You are more aware of red flags, more aware of your triggers, more aware of how quickly imagination can distort facts if communication is absent, and most importantly, You are more aware that love without emotional safety is incomplete. And emotional safety requires consistency, honesty, and mutual vulnerability. And as you stand at this crossroads, you feel something unexpected: power, not the loud aggressive kind, but the quiet stable kind that comes from knowing you will be okay regardless of the outcome, because your stability is no longer attached to another person's past or secrets. It is rooted in your self-respect, and self-respect makes every future decision stronger. And when you finally decide whether to rebuild slowly or to close the door completely, you do it with calm conviction, and that conviction becomes your evolution, because this was never just a story about someone hiding something. It was a story about you discovering that your peace matters more than drama, your clarity matters more than mystery, and your emotional security matters more than temporary attachment. And once you internalize that, you stop chasing explanations and start choosing environments that feel safe naturally. And that shift, that single internal shift, changes everything that comes next.